Welcome back to Gunsmith Forge. Now, when most people hear police duty, they think of traffic citations, neighborhood patrols, or maybe busting a drunk driver on the highway. But every so often, what starts off routine turns into a split-second fight for survival. That's exactly our focus today, looking back at the bloodiest and most infamous gun battles in American law enforcement history. And trust me, no Hollywood flick can capture how raw and unpredictable the real thing gets. Sure, movies have made gunfights look polished over the last few decades, but they will never match the chaos, the sudden violence, and the gut-wrenching reality that officers in the field have endured. We're revisiting these shootouts, not just for the action, but to study how they spiraled out of control and why they ended the way they did. Along the way, we pay our respects to the men and women who didn't come home. Those fallen officers are a stark reminder of just how high the cost of public safety really is. So, buckle up. It's time to count them down. Number 5. The 1993 Waco Siege. In the spring of 1993, the small town of Axtell, Texas, became the stage for one of the most notorious standoffs in United States history. The name you've heard 100 times before. The Branch Davidians, a religious sect led by David Koresh. Word spread that these folks weren't just hoarding a couple of deer rifles. They were sitting on an arsenal. Reports suggested close to 250 firearms, ranging from semi-automatic rifles to grenades, straight out of a war zone. On February 28th, about 80 ATF agents stormed in to arrest Koresh and search the 77-acre compound. Like most standoffs, each side has its own version of how it started. The feds claim the Davidians shot first, while survivors inside swear it was the ATF who opened up. Regardless, when the gunfire finally stopped, 10 people lay dead. But that was just the beginning. The situation turned into a 51-day siege. FBI negotiators worked non-stop, managing to convince 44 Davidians to leave unharmed. Koresh himself stayed on the phone for more than 60 hours, spread across over 2,000 calls, always finding a way to dodge giving himself up. Then came April 19th. Armored vehicles pushed in, pumping tear gas into the compound. Moments later, fire tore through the buildings. By the time the blaze ended, 75 people, including Koresh, were gone. Children were among the dead, and to this day, arguments rage about whether the fire or suicide ended most of those lives. Number 4. The 1970 Newhall Incident. In the year 1970, the quiet community of Newhall, California, saw a tragedy that reshaped American police training forever. On April 6th, 2 young highway patrolmen, Walter Frago and Roger Gore, spotted a car tied to a man with a gun report. They pulled it over, called for support, and stepped up thinking it was a standard stop. What happened next was pure disaster. As Officer Gore approached, the passenger door swung open, and Jack Twining jumped out with a revolver blazing. Frago was cut down instantly, and before Gore could react, Twining dropped him too. The driver, Bobby Davis, jumped in with his own gun, making the fight twice as lethal. Backup arrived, officers James Pence and George Allen. But by then, it was chaos. With their partners already down and gunfire everywhere, both men fought back with everything they had, but were killed in the exchange. Twining and Davis escaped, triggering a 9-hour manhunt. Twining holed up inside a house, even taking a hostage for a short time. When officers gassed the place, he chose to put a stolen shotgun under his chin rather than surrender. Davis was captured alive, convicted, and sentenced to death. But in 1972, California scrapped capital punishment, so his sentence shifted to life without parole. He spent the rest of his years in some of the toughest prisons in the state Folsom, Pelican Bay, and finally Kern Valley until his death in 2009. Number 3. The 1974 Slash Shootout. The 70s were a wild ride, and nothing shows it better than the Symbionese Liberation Army. If you've read up on that decade or listened to old cops talk, you know these were the same radicals who kidnapped Patty Hearst and shocked the country. Fast forward to May 17th, 1974. Los Angeles turned into a literal battlefield. No Hollywood script required. Here's the chain of events. A day before the mayhem, a couple SLA operatives tried to lift ammo from a sporting goods store and almost got bagged. Their escape van got spotted, which tipped off police to one of their hideouts. Then LAPD got an anonymous tip about heavily armed suspects inside. Before long, more than 400 officers, plus the FBI, county sheriffs, state troopers, and even firefighters, had the whole block on lockdown. Forget smooth talking. Negotiations went nowhere. SWAT flooded the place with tear gas, and the SLA responded with a storm of bullets. LAPD countered with AR-15 rifles, while the SLA sprayed back with chopped M1 carbines and even tossed homemade grenades. Roughly 2 hours into the battle, the safe house went up in flames, likely sparked by a hot gas canister. Out of the inferno, 3 women bolted for safety, none of whom were even SLA members. One poor soul had simply passed out after a party and woke up trapped in a war zone. The real carnage unfolded when Nancy Ling Perry and Camilla Hall charged out, guns blazing. Hall allegedly pointed her weapon and was cut down instantly, while Perry was dropped with well-placed shots. Another SLA fighter dragged Hall's body back into the burning building. By the time it was over, SLA leader Donald DeFries had taken his own life, and the rest either perished in the fire or died from gunfire and smoke. 19 firearms were recovered from the rubble, and the total round count? Nearly 9,000 rounds exchanged. The kicker? Not a single officer, firefighter, or civilian was killed. Every casualty was on the SLA side. To this day, it remains one of the most one-sided and unforgettable shootouts in U.S. history. Number 2. The 1997 North Hollywood Shootout. February 28, 1997. Sun shining over North Hollywood. But what unfolded looked more like a war zone than a bank robbery. Larry Phillips Jr. and Emil Matassarianu rolled up to a Bank of America branch, looking like they were going into combat instead of a score. At exactly 9:16 in the morning, the duo stormed out, bags full of cash, and walked straight into an LAPD ambush. They didn't surrender, they opened fire. The firefight that followed saw nearly 2,000 rounds hurled back and forth. Here's what made this shootout infamous. Most street cops of that era carried 9mm pistols or 38 special revolvers. These 2 criminals were armed to the teeth with Chinese-made AK-47 rifles, a Bushmaster .223 with a 100-round drum, a Heckler & Koch HK-91 chambered in .762 NATO, and a Beretta 92 FS pistol. On top of that, they had homemade body armor covering them head to toe, shrugging off standard-issue police ammo. Eventually, SWAT arrived with heavier rifles and better gear, but the fight was still brutal. Phillips, bleeding and out of ammunition, turned a gun on himself. Matassarianu tried to carjack a pickup after cops shot out his tires, but he was riddled with bullets in his legs and bled out before paramedics could save him. The shootout forced a nationwide reevaluation of police armament. The suspects fired off around 1,100 rounds, while officers returned about 650. For a city that built its reputation on staged movie gunfights, this one was terrifyingly real, and it permanently reshaped how American law enforcement equips its officers. Number 1. The 1986 Miami-Dade Massacre. Let's rewind to April 11th, 1986. Miami-Dade, Florida. The setting looked like paradise, palm trees and sun, but what went down became the deadliest shootout modern federal agents had ever faced. The main players? William Maddox and Michael Lee Platt. On paper, they were small-time landscapers. In reality, they lived for fast cars and high-powered rifles. Both were tied to a string of armed robberies, and the FBI had them under close watch. That morning, agents including Benjamin Grogan and Jerry Dove tailed the suspects. When the pair suddenly pulled into a farm store's drive-thru, Special Agent Richard Manauzi boxed them in, sparking chaos. FBI vehicles rammed their car, but instead of surrendering, Maddox and Platt opened fire. The scene turned into close-quarters carnage. Agents were hit, sheet metal shredded, and rounds flying at point-blank range. Despite being badly wounded, Agent Edmundo Mireles fought back like a warrior. First, he blasted with a 12-gauge shotgun, then finished the job with his .357 Magnum revolver, dropping both suspects and ending the bloodbath. When the smoke cleared, 2 agents were dead, 5 more were injured, and only 1 walked away untouched. The fight exposed a painful truth. FBI handguns and revolvers were hopelessly outclassed by rifles. In the aftermath, the Bureau adopted the 10mm auto as their new duty round. That choice later evolved into the .40 Smith & Wesson, the .357 SIG, and the 9x25 Dillon. This wasn't just another case file. It was a turning point that rewrote the way American law enforcement armed itself, all because 2 violent men forced agents into the deadliest gunfight in Bureau history.